Tonight's topic we're going to talk about is people. Mostly the most challenging part of every business is mastering people. And then following on, we're going to get Cameron to talk a little bit about the Star Now experience and share a few of his stories of actually going out there and doing it. Now, it's an interesting story about people. One of the people that I came to mentor at one stage was an ex-737 pilot. He used to fly in and out of Wellington every day, flying a 737. And he came to me and said, "Mark, look, can you help me out? I've taken on this new project management role inside the software company, and I'm struggling, I really am." And I said, "Come on, you used to fly a 737 aircraft in and out of Wellington Airport." As it turned out, he dived into a creek, had a head injury and couldn't fly the plane anymore because of some head injuries. But I said, "Look, you used to fly this plane." He said, "Yeah, but flying a plane is simple. When you fly a plane into Wellington, if the plane does this, you do that. If the plane does this, you do that. You just keep going through the list, and when you run out of the list, you've hit the ground. It's too late. You can't do anything more." There is no manual for people, though. There is no manual for people, and this is one of the biggest challenges we all face with businesses when we start to get them growing. And here's my take. For a number of years, I ran the business incubator in here in Wellington called Creative HQ. Still running today. Fantastic place. In fact, that's where I met Cameron. One of the observations I made very early on: a business will not succeed if there's only one person in it. It never gets off the ground. It's like an aeroplane running down the runway. You just simply never get enough wind underneath your wings. In fact, it was close as last week, I spoke to a woman. Great idea for a business, and I said to her, "Look, unless you can go and convince someone else to give up your day job and join you in your quest to grow this business, you're never going to succeed." Sounds very harsh, but it is so true. There's too much stuff, compliance. There's just the list of things to do is too big. And so very quickly you need to find a way in which you can interact with people, even at the simplest sense, is how do you get the first person on board? We plugged in. That's all right, we can go the old-fashioned way. Interesting quote here from Peter Drucker. "The only things that happen naturally in an organisation are friction and confusion and malperformance. Everything else," it's going now, oh, you've turned it on. "Everything else is a result of leadership." And this is so true. You know, we've all worked for organisations, and a quote that I'll mention, in fact I'll mention it right now. You know, people join organisations because of the organisation, but they always leave because of the boss. And if you are the person who's heading up this organisation, you do not want to be the reason that people leave your organisation. And typically it comes down to the fact that you've done nothing about the confusion and the malpractice and all these other things that are going on inside your company. Now, interesting little definition here, the difference between leadership and management. About going on a journey of creating a company is all about how do you actually create leadership? How do you influence other people to act and get results out of those people, helping them excel? It's not simply about keeping people under control and, in the old-fashioned way of things, carrot and sticks. Interesting, some other little facts about people. One great employee is worth 3 average people. You know, we've all worked in these super high-performing teams, typically small bunch of people doing stuff really well together. If you fail to address these problems going on in your business, it's not only the productivity of the people that are working on these things, but it's all the other people they influence. You know, you've been part of large organisations standing around the water cooler or the coffee machine, and someone starts whinging and moaning about something, and before you know it, everyone's, "Oh yeah, that's all," you know, and before you know it, you've affected the productivity of everyone. And so it's interesting, one of the questions I like to ask people is, you know, what bottlenecks, what is stopping you excelling in your job? And if someone answers that question, "Oh, no, there's nothing in the way of me doing my job well," my suggestion is have a real close look, because more than likely they're doing nothing. And your role in leading up and driving a new company, a new venture, is to get a bunch of people to come and buy in on that cause, and they'll continue to remove the roadblocks away from them and help them move ahead. There's a great book, and well worthwhile. In fact, you don't even have to go and buy the book. If you Google RSA and drive. Just 2 words, RSA, drive. You'll come up with this little YouTube clip here about this book. It's about 11 minutes, a little cartoon strip that goes on. A well worthwhile read. I spent a whole weekend reading the book one time, wrote a nice blog post about it, and then someone commented on my blog post and said, oh, this is a really cool book. And then they actually posted in this little video, the YouTube clip, which in 11 minutes tells you the whole story about the book. But I'll give you a quick 1-minute summary. There was the original age, if we look at the evolution of man, where we were looking at how do we survive, how do we feed ourselves. And then there was the industrial age, which born, if you like, this whole carrot and stick mentality around how we motivate people. This age is gone. I've seen a lot of young people in the room. Most of the young generation today are driven by a greater sense of purpose. You've lived a life where you get everything you need. And I think it's quite fascinating when you look at organisations today that are excelling and doing, they're kicking ass. It's about the ones who have got a cause. They're going on a mission and they're going to go and do something. Evidence that people are more interested in causes today. You look at the Christchurch earthquake, and what do they call it? The Barmy Army, or what do they call the army of all the students that got together? Student Army. Yeah, if the city council had got around to doing that, we would still be going through OSH rules. But it just happened because people wanted to get around a cause. And I think it's the same with your business. You need to create this cause and this drive, this bit of glue that sticks everyone together around what your business is all about. Because if you just simply say, hey, look, we're going to reward good behaviour, punish bad behaviour, it's just not going to work. People walk away from this every day. So here we are, 3 simple rules. Have few rules, repeat yourself a lot, and live the rules. For those older people in the room, this is exactly like raising kids. And as soon as you behave and operate in a different manner to what you're telling people, you're going to get caught out. And you need to stick to this and do it very well. And I'm a real fan of defining the company values, call them a mantra, call them whatever you like. I'm going to give you a couple of examples about how you create this glue. Now, the interesting thing is, a lot of people say, oh, what values are appropriate for our business? And the easiest way I've got to detect whether a value has been violated, when you have those moments when someone does something and it really tunes in your gut, you really, really get effed off about it. This is typically because they've violated a core value for the way in which you behave. Now, one of the bits that I see around companies that grow and grow really well is the core team share those values. They hire people by it. And in fact, we've got an example coming up shortly with Netflix. Their whole thing is, look, you've got to fire people because they violate your values. It's one thing, lots of people, all the corporate people out there, all go on about these values and the mission statement and all this sort of carry on. But they create a big fat plaque that sits on the wall. That does nothing for your organisation. It's how do you act and react to the behaviour when they fail to perform to it. Some tips here for growing companies and getting things. So values, I'm going to go on and give you an example. So I've got about 4 or 5 different company examples. I'm going to give you a list of their values and you'll see a bit of a flavour. Business of one never makes it. I talked about that. Hire people that are smarter than you. This is one of the hardest things to do. You need a big ego to start a business. But if it's off the Richter scale and you're not brave enough to bring on people, now it's an interesting comment, A people hire other A people. B people typically hire C grade people, and before you know it, the average intelligence of your organisation is going backward and in a downward spiral. And so you need to be able to recognise that some people have their talents, we are all different, and we bring different things to it. Pay market rate. My suggestion is never pay someone more than market rate as a base salary. By all means, give them an extra bonus, give them some sort of kicker, but it is a one-off event. You may repeat that one-off event multiple times. But I've gone into organisations where people have ratcheted salaries up, and then before you know it, you've got an $80,000 person earning $120,000 a year, and all of a sudden this year he doesn't perform. What are you going to do? And unfortunately, our employment laws in this country are not that well set up to support you as an owner-manager. Diversity is a strength. My take is, look, do not get people 100% like yourself. I'll give you the classic case of this. Was in a tech company once. The support manager was a cynic. He employed a whole bunch of cynics to work around him. What do you think what it was like to work with that team? Not very good. Maybe having one cynic, one black hat person in your team is good, but having a whole room full of them, it just is not going to work. Likewise, age, diversity, background, you work out whatever diversity means for you. Be very clear about your role in the company. And I think this is particularly hard for those of you who are kicking off, as I suggested earlier. My suggestion is you kick off at least 2 of you, if not 3 of you, who are going to be founders of the business. Work out who's going to do what. And equally so, be very, very clear about who is going to be the CEO. And we need to distinguish the role of a shareholder, an employee, and a director, and make sure they are 3 different roles. But I've seen too many companies get stuck where no one wants to make the final call. Someone right from the beginning has got to work out how they're going to make the final call. Now, you need to treat people as individuals. You cannot cookie cutter people and expect the best out of them. Working with people is going to be one of those talents that you need to very quickly acquire in your business. If you are not a people person, my suggestion is go and find someone who is and get them to join up with you real quick and give them half of your company. You will not succeed if you're one of these people who are, the utmost geek, love working by yourself in a dark corner. It's just not going to happen, and so you need to have someone. Thank yous are gold. These things cost you absolutely nothing. But the number of people I've come across who work for other people and have left just simply because their boss would not say thank you. Well done, great job. It's pretty fundamental, but we all forget it. You'll sit and think, oh my gosh, this is all common sense, right? It is. But the trouble is, when you get on to growing your company and doing lots of stuff, all of a sudden, you're moving so goddamn fast. People are the most important asset. You hear it time and time again from CEOs all around the place. But stop and recognise that and make sure you're putting the appropriate amount of time into your people. Trust your gut when you come to hire people. You can read all the books in the world. If you've got a funny feeling about a person, generally there is something going on behind the scenes. And my suggestion is, and this is one of the hardest things, particularly when your company starts growing at a rapid rate, because you need people to come and join your team as fast as you possibly can. Hell, I work for a technology company in a strange place called Martin, halfway between Palmerston North and Wanganui. It could have been worse. It could have been Hamilton. But the point is, we grew from 20 people to 50 people over a period of 18 months. I was trying to hire software engineers. In fact, I spent most of my life trying to hire software engineers. And the trouble is, we got lots of people to come and join us, but every time we made a rush decision, that ended up biting us in the bum. Just consumed a whole lot of our time and energy. In fact, my take is the first 2 or 3 hires you make in your business will determine whether you're successful or not. If you make the wrong hire, it'll kill your company. Full stop. Because it's going to take so much of your time to go through the whole process of getting rid of them that you might as well just pack up shop. And so please take your time. One of the notes I think I got on the closing slide is go and find out something about employment law. You're going to need it. This is going to be one of the most trickiest areas you're going to have to deal with. Sweat equity. This is the business where you're starting a business, you've got no money to pay people, so you give them equity in your business. Employees are employees for the term of their employment. Shareholders are there for life. Please do not give away sweat equity unless people earn it, and you absolutely have to. Because managing shareholders becomes a continual problem that's going to be with you for quite some time. Typically at least the first 5 to 10 years of your company's life, because you're not going to be able to sell any shares and create any value out of those shares, and so you're stuck with those shareholders for a very long time. And so if you can avoid it, do not give away equity, and particularly to management consultants like myself. Please do not give them equity. I think it's a dumb decision. Make them work for you for 6 months, pay them the token amount of money that you can get them, and then once you've got trust and hey, this is someone that I want to have in my organisation for a long period of time, then by all means, make a percentage of their payment package some form of equity. Now, it's hard because most of you, that's all you've got to play with. You don't have cash. But do not be one of these people who goes and gives away, oh, Sally's just joined my team. She's the best bloody C# programmer in the world, and I need that person. And so you give her 20% of your company. My suggestion is, okay, maybe give her 1% of your company and say, hey, look, when we've delivered the first version and we've actually got customers coming in the door, once we've done that and you're still part of the team, then you get 20% of the company, not beforehand. People should earn equity rather than just simply be gifted it. Gift stuff that your mother does. This is about, this is the most precious resource that you've got. So I want to talk a little bit about culture and values. This is Netflix. If you just go and look at the Google Netflix culture slides, they've got about a 140 slide presentation. It just reads like a little book. But this is the most important thing. The real company values, opposed to the nice sounding values, are shown by who gets rewarded, promoted, or let go. And I think that's a fantastic way to approach how you pull people around you. Now, when I talk about magnetic companies, these are the companies that people want to join. I heard a great quote the other day. Someone said, how do you create a story about your business that you're going to sell to the 20th employee? Because the first couple of employees is easy. It's like we're going on this great mission, we're going to take on the world, this is what we're going to do. But what's the story you're going to tell your 10th or your 20th employee? Because maybe the first employee, you're going to give them some equity once they've earned it, and they're going to become rich and famous. But for the 10th employee or the 20th employee, what story are you going to give for them? Now, I'm going to show you a couple of slides with a couple of different value statements. And it's interesting when I do a bit of work with companies around trying to work out how do they describe the type of people they want in their organisation. And occasionally I brought up one of these slides, and in fact, their R&D manager said, I want to join that company. Now, it was a classic thing just by simply looking at the values. Oh, in fact, this is the company. Atlassian, I don't know how many in the room know about it, but these are a couple of young guys. They won Entrepreneur of the Year in Australia, have been taking on the world. And just take a moment to have a look at in fact, this is one of the founders there. He's got a tattoo on his back. That's sort of commitment to the cause. This is what they stand for. And so, yeah, they're a little bit off the edge, but they've got substance, and that's the sort of people that join the company. And, you want, obviously, customers mean a lot to them. And so, yeah, they use a bit of profanity in there. Yeah.
What does the company actually do?
Is there someone in the room? They sell like little boxes.
They are a software development company. They sell wiki-type websites for companies to host internally, etc. That sort of thing.
Yeah, they're selling enterprise. My take on them is that they are selling products into the enterprise IT solutions market, and they were taking on big giants, people the size of Cisco and some of these, some of the big mega players. And so they came up with a different approach to business. Customer service was everything for them, and so they were going to go the extra mile. And so they've come up with. It's interesting. Talk about their culture. They came up with a concept called Fedex Days. And what's a FedEx day? FedEx deliver overnight. And so what they say is, look, we're a bunch of geeks. Let's not, when someone talks about doing a staff offsite, let's not go off to some kumbaya camp and go hug in the corner. They want to go, and if they have free time, they want to play with all the toys. They've got all this technology. During the week, the normal life at Atlassian, they're working on customer deadlines, they're delivering stuff. And so what they started up, this thing was called Fedex Days. They could have 24 hours to use all the company equipment and come up with a product. The only rule was, two rules. One, the company owned the output. And the second one is they had to deliver something overnight. And it was amazing what they came up with. In fact, I've seen this quoted in, I don't know whether it's Harvard or Stanford. These people are starting to quote little funky little companies like this in Australia. And it's interesting, I heard this is where Gmail came from. It was not the fact that it was core business for Google, and they used to run these sort of off-camp sort of things, and they allowed their staff to just go and do stuff because that's what they like doing. And it's like, just because, people say, we're going to have this off-site, we're going to look after our staff. Work out what hits their buttons. Sometimes it's just simply doing more of what they already do every day. This is a Me Manifesto. You can go and have a look at a website. Rowan's got this on his blog. I think it's where I took it from, where you can go through and actually look what every one of these line items meant for Me. I don't know whether they still use it. Maybe someone in the room might know whether they still use the core manifesto, but you can see that it actually glues the organisation together. Interesting, they mention hire people smarter than you, be like electricity. It says something about what it is to be a member of their organisation. It's interesting, you need to work out what the natural rhythm of your organisation is going to be like. I spent 5 years of my life working for a NASDAQ-listed tech company based in Wingate, Lower Hutt. But our head office was in San Jose, Silicon Valley. And you know what? One of the things when I used to look at hiring people, I'd drill them about how comfortable are you with change. Because we're a NASDAQ-listed company, every quarter there was a restructure. And so if you got hung up about what was on your little business card and your title and your job, this was not the place for you to work. Because at the end of the quarter, we'd be either trying to restructure you out of the organisation, but if you're good, we'd more than likely be finding a new job for you, because this is how the organisation worked. And so if you weren't comfortable with that rapid change, then don't be part of us. This is a software company in Auckland that I do a bit of work with. They have a cool bit of software that analyses DNA sequences. Bunch of PhDs, bioinformatics, but they're into science and stuff. Interesting enough, they use the word awesome. It was one of their, they used to have a boring list of values, and they were using all the sort of corporatized sort of stuff, and it was doing nothing for them. Whereas one of their things, so they got, we dare to be awesome, we dare to create with purpose, we inspire our customers, and we get results. So the whole thing about daring to be awesome was, this was not just simply about being a boring software company that did what customers expected. It was like, how do you do something beyond? How do you inspire people to do stuff beyond? This is Netflix. But you're sort of getting a general flavour. This is worthwhile taking some time to work out, what is your company going to look like when you get beyond just you and your mate who are kicking this thing off? So create your set. Here's my tips on how do you create your set. Think about 5 people that you would love to have in your organisation, not because of their technical skill, but because of how they behave. And then write a list of all the behaviours and how you would describe them. And the overlap of those 5 people will give you a very strong hint. The biggest hint, though, typically comes from looking at the 3 people you would never hire in your organisation. Now, you've all come across these people. Some of these people are absolutely whizzes at whatever they do, but you think, my gosh, I could never work with them. What are the characteristics and what are the behaviours that they have? And make sure that you've got a value that covers that off. Now, for example, I'm a very open sort of guy. My leadership style is very open. Any people who operate on hidden agendas, I just can't comprehend it. It just grinds my gut apart when you come across people who shaft you in the back. So why don't we just have an adult conversation? And so, yeah, it's those heart-wrenching moments where you actually work out what it is that you should not be hiring into your organisation. Here's a bit of theory that I stumbled across, in fact, only last week. We're busy, I'm re-engineering the Activate program and been coming up with a whole lot of new material for it. And around the whole teams thing, I came across this Drexler-Sibbett team performance model. And so these people, and it's always interesting to look at all these behavioural models and stuff. This is the 7 stages that every team will go through. And the unfortunate thing is, if you get it wrong, you can very quickly step back a stage. And so if you look at the first one is like, why are we here? And it's interesting, if you don't get this right, well, if you get it right, you get good purpose, team identity, membership. If you don't, you get disorientation, uncertainty. The next phase here, you move into this trust building thing. If you don't trust the people around you to deliver do what they say they're going to do, you're going to end up in a mess. Likewise, what are you doing? What's your goals? Of course, then how are you going to go about it? And as the process goes on, you can sort of see. But very quickly, and you'll see teams that are stuck. Now, the interesting thing, in doing a startup, you've got the most opportune time to create the most productive team you will ever be part of. I was involved in growing this point of sale business from nothing to 32 million. When there was a team of 10 of us, we kicked ass. We really did. We never ever got back to that productivity ever again. But if you had the wrong people in the team, it would just kill. And if you're a one product and you've got no revenue yet, and you're bridging that awful gap between investing a whole lot of your time, energy, and money before you're getting that first bit of revenue in, you want to make sure you've got the right people around it. And so being aware of these sorts of models are really important, not only for creating, but also sustaining that, that natural sort of zone, when you're operating in that zone and really performing well. Yeah, so what step are we at? And then what do we need to do to get to the next step? A couple of fundamental questions. If you have a look, I write a blog at succinct.co.nz, and I'll put a bit more information up. This is must be going to be my next blog post next week, when I've got a bit of time on an aeroplane to write a bit more information about this. But it's interesting how teams work. Getting how teams work in your business is just as important as the decision if you're in a technology company, what architecture, what software platform. And in fact, I'd even go as far as to say, in the investment world, which I've spent the last 3 years of my life helping investors select and choose companies to invest in, investors will always invest in a B idea with an A team rather than an A idea with a B team. The people and how you work together is right at the top of the list as to whether you're going to succeed or not. You can have the dumbest idea on this planet, but if you execute it really well, hell, we've got Microsoft, right? Okay, so the little, behavioural modelling, people. I think this is a really interesting thing to go and explore. I think it's certainly when you start out in your business, it's worthwhile having a look at a simple model. Hell, what we'll do is, if I can do that, yeah. Here's a real simple model. We'll just play a little game. 4 shapes: a triangle, a circle, a square, or a squiggle. I want everyone to pick a shape that they feel most comfortable with, and then a shape that they feel second most comfortable with. Okay? So which shape do you like the most? Which shape do you like the second most? Who chose the triangle? Okay, so the triangle people are typically big picture people who see the bigger picture. Their office is usually full of trophies, sense of achievement, or some sort of ego sort of driven thing, right? Who chose a circle? Okay, you're the people who never get anything done unless, you're by yourself, because you love communicating with people, It's like all these things. They're a strength and a weakness. Who chose the square? Okay, the squares typically are very structured, detail-orientated people. Who chose the squiggle? They're typically the creatives, either really early for a meeting or really late. But it's interesting. I don't know how true that was for all of you. I'm a triangle circle. So yeah, I only create stuff usually. When I want to do all these presentations, it's usually done between 8 o'clock at night and 2 in the morning because there's no one to talk to. Because that's who I am, But I love the bigger picture and I love selling the bigger picture. But you know what? You need to be very mindful of the fact, I used to have a software manager who was definitely a square, a process guy. Their desks are tidy, everything's got an order. I'd come back from an overseas trip, we're changing direction of the product. This is where we're going. And I learned very quickly, well, Mark, slow down, because my natural thing as a triangle is just to go full steam ahead. Heaven forbid anyone gets in my way. But one of the things you need to learn about behavioural modelling is be aware of what your natural behaviour is. Because when times get tough, you're always going to revert back to that. As we mature as adults, we become very adept at presenting ourselves in different shapes and forms. But under pressure, you always revert to your natural mode. And so, I'd have to make sure with this, the head of the software development team, that I would explain why and how I'd come up with the decision I had that we were going to change direction. Because if I didn't, he would never go and do anything about it. Now, you can sort of take these models to the next step. Here is an example. This is a DISC model, which is around basically two different paradigms, perception of personal power and the environment, and you can sort of slowly expand this out, and then you'll sort of see here, you'll see that they talk about dominance, influence, conscientiousness and steadiness, and the interesting thing is it splits people into task-orientated and people-orientated, and I think the other, and fast and slow pace. But the point of all these models, and it doesn't matter which one you use, it's really nice to understand what and how your people tick together. And you do not want everyone to be the same. Having a room full of the same people is no good. Somewhere along the line, you need someone who can follow on and do stuff. I know in all my good leadership roles, I've always had a fantastic lieutenant at my side. When you've got a fantastic lieutenant at your side, they get on and do stuff. They can actually follow through. I can do the detail, but I don't really like it. If you ever read any of my emails or blog posts, they'll be full of typos and spelling mistakes. That's just who I am. But if you want to do and create a complete whole, you need to build complete teams. I think one of the it's interesting. I'm running 30 minutes, running a little bit over time. Last slide. Make sure you define your role as a CEO in your organisation. This is really important. I think too many people leave it too late. To decide what is their role as opposed to the other people they start the business with. I think I've covered off all those other things. I'm not going to touch on the legal stuff, but it can be a massive trap. Make sure you tick the right boxes. Just one note on closing. We are kicking off the new revised, better, if you like. I'm involved in it, so it's got to be better. Activate. Activate used to be a 14-week program. We're going to condense most of the learning into one kick-ass weekend. We're doing this September 2 to 4. We're doing it in a place, Tatum Park, which is miles away from anywhere for a good reason. So if you want to really accelerate where your business is going, and we're going to start Friday night at 7 o'clock, and sleep is optional. We're going to finish Sunday night at 5 o'clock. We're going to cover off all the aspects. You're going to end up coming out of it with a draft business plan. And follow-up from that is included in the prices, your food, accommodation. We're also going to do a follow-up half-day strategy session with you one-on-one.